This is Whiskey Whereabouts. I'm Tim, and as this video drops, we're fast approaching Valentine's Day. And when we think of Valentine's Day, we think of chocolate, right? And so today I'm going to break down my list of the top 5 Scotch whiskies with a chocolate sort of flavor element in the profile. Let's get into it. My whiskey journey has taken me to Scotland and back. I've explored whiskey education, tastings, and distilleries from Islay to Speyside. And now my journey continues here with you on Whiskey Whereabouts. So first things first, we are not talking about flavored whiskeys, chocolate flavored whiskey. We're talking about Scotch whiskies with a sort of large number of flavor elements in the nose, in the palate, in the finish, and among those is a chocolate or maybe a cocoa element. And when I think of these types of whiskeys with that sort of note, I am usually thinking about sherry matured, or at least partly sherry matured whiskeys. Why? It's because that chocolate note largely comes from the cask. When the sort of lignin in the wood is breaking down after it's been toasted, it's releasing different flavor compounds. There's vanilla coming out of the vanillin that's in there. You're going to get different flavors, and among them, you can get a chocolate element, especially when it combines with that sweetness from that wine cask. So you get that sherry sweet mixed with these sort of flavor compounds coming out of the wood, and you've got yourself a nice chocolate note. Last thing before we kick off the list, I'm setting a price limit on the bottle so it doesn't get too out of control, and it's going to be $270. Weird number, right? There's a reason, we'll get to it, but before then, as always, we're going to start the list with an honorable mention, and that honorable mention is going to be the bottle that I reviewed on this channel last week. It's the Glenallachie 10-year batch strength batch 8. If you haven't seen my video, I reviewed this bottle, compared it to its predecessor, batch 7. And the reason, even though this bottle is pretty chocolate forward, that I excluded it from the list proper is that it is a batch specific whiskey. And in fact, that chocolate flavor was a big distinction between batch 7 and batch 8. So I don't want to sort of get attached to one specific batch. The whiskey's too good and it has too much chocolate flavor elements in it, in batch 8 at least, for me not to acknowledge it. But as these things sort of fluctuate from batch to batch, I left it off. Okay, so starting off the list proper, number 5. It's a pretty reliable whiskey, one that we all know very well. It's Bunnahabhain 12 years. So we're starting on Islay, 46%, non-chill filtered, no color added. Obviously, it's bourbon matured and sherry matured. So you've got that sherry influence coming in from the wood, giving it what I think of as a sort of more of a cocoa sort of note in that otherwise very, very good, very nice whiskey. It has that sort of element to it, and so it's on the list. Hard to keep it off. All right, number 4 on the list, and we're staying on Islay for this bottle, Kilchoman Snag. This is a non-age statement whiskey. It's Kilchoman. It's 46% whiskey, and it is non-chill filtered, no color added. It's 2/3 sherry matured and 1/3 bourbon matured, and here we have a nice peated expression that still has this chocolate element. It's not just for Speyside or Highland sort of sherried whiskeys. If we go looking for it, we can find a nice chocolate flavor in a peated whiskey like this one. This has a really sort of nice, what I think of as a pretty chocolate forward on the palate. Then on the finish, you get the smoke, you've got the sort of peat, you've got the saltiness, and as that first sort of wave fades, as that finish plays out, it leaves behind that chocolate again. It's very satisfying. It's one of my sort of favorite sort of complementary flavors with this type of chocolate experience, with the smoke, especially at this time of year. A really, really nice choice. Okay, so those first couple of whiskeys, very easily under $100. Now at number 3, the price is going up. So is the ABV, and so is the sherry influence. Going to Speyside finally, and it's going to be the Glenfarclas 105, the cask strength. It's a 60% ABV non-age statement whiskey, but it is fully sherry matured. It's going to run you at least $115 probably. I think of it as a whiskey with and again, that really sort of cocoa chocolate sort of element that is present in that whiskey, along with a lot of other sort of flavor elements, but it's there sort of running through, and so that's how it makes the list here with a nice cask strength presentation. So as we move on to number 2, we're moving on to the Highlands, and spoiler alert, that's where we're going to stay for the rest of the list. And here at number 2, the price of the bottle is going way up. The ABV is coming back down, and that's probably because we're getting a really robust, healthy age statement from the GlenDronach 18-year, the Allardyce. This is a 46% fully Oloroso sherry matured whiskey. We're getting that sherry influence, and it is no color added. It's GlenDronach, so we, assuming it's chill filtered, but it is a very complex, very, very nice whiskey that does have that sort of chocolate, sort of cocoa element at different stages. It's not a cheap bottle. It's over $200, but it's a pretty fantastic bottle. All right, so moving on to number 1, and we're still in the Highlands, and some of you, especially my hints about the price, may already be ahead of me because this is kind of the whiskey that I think of when we think of this type of flavor element, and there are obvious reasons. This is a whiskey from Glenmorangie, a non-age statement whiskey called the Signet. And this is a whiskey with a pretty unusual cask configuration. So we've got bourbon casks, we've got sherry casks, obviously, we've talked about that influence, and it also has new charred oak casks. So that charring on that oak is breaking down sort of those elements in the cask. But we also have chocolate influence from the original malt. They describe it as a chocolate malt, the way they've treated it before it ever goes through the distillation process. So we've got at the beginning, at inception, and in maturation, elements that are bringing in these sort of chocolate sort of flavors. And to me, this is sort of the kind of defining whiskey for this type of flavor experience, and so it had to be on the list. So what are you going to be drinking with your Valentine around the fire? Let us know in the comments. In the meantime, I would love it if you subscribe. You can use this big button that's going to pop up right over here. That way you won't miss any of the future videos coming on the channel. I'll see you on the next one.